Hello and welcome to Lead by Example,
the podcast discussing current social justice issues.
Before you listen to this podcast, we just want to give you a quick disclaimer.
We are in no way an authority on these issues.
Our intention is to open healthy discussions without being insensitive.
Due to the length of this podcast, we are aware that we may not cover every intersection of injustice.
However, our aim is to build an understanding of all types of social issues which are intrinsically connected so that they can be better addressed.
We encourage anyone listening to this podcast to take part in the discussions and feel free to ask any questions or suggest topics to us. We hope you enjoy today's podcast.
Hi guys, it's Future Phoebe here. I'm just about to upload this episode and I thought I would just give you guys a quick warning. This was the first episode that we actually filmed for the podcast. And so we edited it straight after we had filmed it and then kept it, and now obviously we're uploading it a little bit later. So from when we filmed it and edited it, we have kind of improved on things that we've learned, but just a warning, there's like quite a few kind of inconsistencies, especially with audio quality. Some of the editing is a little bit jumpy. Obviously since then we've kind of learned from that, and yeah, but this episode is a little bit up and down, but hopefully you can kind of ignore that and push through because we still wanted to upload this episode because we still feel like there's a lot that is worth talking about and passing on. So hopefully you can still enjoy it, and apologies for the kind of bad quality, but thank you.
Today we're going to be discussing feminism as an umbrella topic and introducing the stigmas around it and some common misconceptions that people have. Okay, so what do you know about the history of feminism?
I feel like most of the things I know about it are modern feminism, yeah. Especially like my own experience. I'm like, oh yeah. I know so much. Like I know so much from Instagram. Like all these memes I repost. Yeah, I know so much.
Yeah.
It is quite important actually, isn't it, to like understand the history behind what we're fighting for today. But I mean, as far as the actual history, we know that the suffragette movement,
they gave up their lives, really, like their expected lives as women and mothers and family people, and the things that other women were enjoying. It wasn't that women weren't enjoying being mothers and stuff, so they gave that up in order to fight for equal rights because they could see that women were being oppressed.
Didn't have a choice between living that life at home. Yeah. I think, which weirdly is actually quite relevant today still. Like I still have conversations with people about how you're just expected as a woman. In fact, like gender pay gap, one of the main, I guess, reasons for having a gender pay gap is that women have to take out this time for maternity leave. Yeah. And I just think, how is that we're in this age now and women still have to make that decision between, do I want to have kids or do I want to have a career? Yeah. Like I just find that crazy.
And that's not even a question that men have to ask themselves, even if they have kids. Right. The vast majority of men don't even have to think about that. No. There's a few men that are stay-at-home dads, or there's a few men that are single dads, but they are like the vast minority. Yeah. It barely impacts them. Like they might have a couple of weeks of paternity leave, which is also a very recent thing, and then go back to living their daily lives. I'm not saying it's easy to be a dad, but I had a conversation with a friend. So he was telling me a story about someone who was a man and was bringing up his kids because his wife had left, and he was like, how could she walk out on her kids like that? Like that's outrageous. My friend, who's the history teacher, was telling me about, like, there's, like, Nobel Prize winners that have literally taken credit for the work of their assistants who are women, or, like, their wives who are women, and they've like...
It just makes me angry. Yeah. Like, I can't help it, but I'm fuming. Yeah. Like, excuse me. Like, how is that okay? Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you heard people talking about feminism, or you heard about feminism?
I don't think I remember, like, the word, like, the first time I heard the word being used. I know that I had an epiphany a few years ago where I realised that my mum had kind of brought me up to be a feminist without realising it. And in a way that she is, like, quite tomboyish, if you want to call it that, where like she doesn't wear makeup. And I started to realise like actually that was part of it, but also the fact that both of my parents have never brought me up and said, by the way, you're a woman, so you can do it. They've always just said, you can do it. And they've never mentioned gender. It's never come into it.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing and a bad thing. It can be a bad thing because sometimes you need to be aware that there are these things, So like for the gender pay gap and things like that, you have to be aware that actually I am a woman. There are things that men won't have to do. Yeah. Maternity leave, like, in fact, the whole idea of having kids to me is something I've only had to start thinking about recently, and I've suddenly realised, like, oh my gosh, there's all these things I need to think about. What if I really want a really good career, like, I want to be successful, but I don't want to have to take out 18 years to look after my kids, you know, depending on how many kids I have.
Yeah.
And actually, it would have been nice to have been told, you need to think about this. This is something that you have to deal with. Maybe not as a child, but maybe a little bit older. But on the positive side, I think I've never had that concept of I'm a woman, so people are going to treat me differently. Like I've never been told that. I've never had someone, like my parents never said to me,
you can't do that because you're a girl.
Right. Or even you can do that despite the fact you're a woman. So I feel like I've never thought of my womanness, the fact that I'm a woman and I can do this. Femininity? Womanhood?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, womanhood, whatever. I've never looked at them as like correlating. They've kind of been separate.
Okay. Sometimes there's a mental barrier which can kind of kill motivation. If you're thinking people won't take me seriously because I'm a woman, people will only take me seriously if I'm dressed up or if I'm wearing heels or if I'm looking a certain way. Like, because that's detached for you, it probably means like, no, people can accept me for me, and if they don't like it, I'm going to carry on doing it anyway.
Yeah. I remember going into my first job, the senior leadership team, were all men. Like, where are all the women on the board? Yeah, I just remember, like, that was one of my first encounters in, like, a workplace of, like, wow, like, that's actually something I've noticed, and I feel quite strongly about this. I think that was probably where it started. Where are all the, you know, women in the STEM industry, the science, technology, engineering, maths? The funny thing is, I feel like people would just be like, oh, well, they're just not interested in that. I really find it hard to believe that there are no women who are interested in science.
And do you know what I think that comes down to is, even starting at such a young age, boys are encouraged to be investigative, and boys are encouraged when they do something sciencey, whereas I feel like girls are more encouraged when they play cooking or pretend to look after a baby, and that's where they get their praise from. And as kids, you do what you get praised for, so the gap starts from such a young age, and it just like grows and grows.
So what do you remember to be like your first memory of the concept of feminism?
I remember probably in sixth form was when I first became interested or heard about it and ever like spoke about it. But I definitely knew about it without realising that it was feminism before that, from a young age. I remember like almost being angry as a child because I would always want to join in with the boy activities, and I would always want to, like, I'd see boys like wrestling or playing sport, and all of the girls were doing fun things like sitting, braiding each other's hair and stuff, and I liked that stuff too. But I would be in the girl group doing that kind of thing, and I'd get bored of that, and I'd look over to the boys and I'd want to go and join in, but inside me I knew that if I did that, like, I'd have a negative feeling. I didn't know what. I just knew that if I went and did that, there'd be something said.
Which is sad, because if you think about all those like missed opportunities, I guess.
In probably year 13, so around 2015, it was when Emma Watson was starting to speak up quite a lot about feminism, and in her award shows and just in general. I went to sixth form and I was in a friendship group with quite a lot of boys, but I remember that being ridiculed. I distinctly remember like, oh, I don't want to associate with feminism because that's what feminism is, and that's the reaction that feminism gets. Is people making fun of it, discounting it, and saying like, oh, she's hot, but she's a feminist. Like,
she should shut her mouth.
Let's talk about her beauty and let's just put her back in her place. So I think that kind of took me back a step, because then I had the stigma around feminism and I didn't look into what it was and why it was important and was like, okay, I don't want to do that. I don't know what I do want to do, but I don't want to do that. And then it was at university, probably when I was 18, and I was studying it in my degree, that I started actually looking at what it was. I actually started challenging my own views of what it was.
So obviously, because we grew up in church, we had a lot of experience of gender being quite binary, like being put into these two categories. Like if you're a man, you do this. If you're a woman, you do this. Yeah. And one very clear example I can remember is every so often they'd have like a women's day or a men's breakfast or something, right? And so the men's breakfast would be like a full fryer, and then the women's day was like
tea and cakes and
and you can do some craft, and God knows I hate craft. So I used to be like, the fuck? Like, I don't want to be here. Like, I want to be out there. I want to be having the fry up right now. And like, okay, not all the men's stuff I wanted to do, but I wanted to pick and choose. I wanted to get my nails done, but I also wanted to have a fry up. Yeah. It's crazy how it's just enforced into like every part of your life. Yeah. And you don't realise it. And it's like, actually, once you start to break things down, you look at things like the patriarchy, the way that the world is set up. When you get married, you take your husband's name. Mr. and Mrs. Why is it Mr. and Mrs. and not Mrs. and Mr.? Why is there Mrs., Miss, Ms.?
Why do people need to know the
your marital
status of a woman,
but not of a man?
But a man can be Mr. his whole life.
Why do women have engagement rings but men don't? There's so much built into our society that you don't realise until you start digging a little bit, and then you're just you've dug yourself a damn grave because you're not getting out of that. Once you know, like, you can't go back.
The other thing about weddings, the concept of being given away, is giving you to your husband. Like, so that's no coincidence that they've used that language. That was literally how it worked, was you belonged to your father until you belonged to your husband.
And a dowry. Let's talk about dowries. Yeah. The fact that your husband was paying for you.
Yeah, this is why, like, I love the whole idea of being married to someone, like, of having, like, a soulmate or, like, having someone that you spend your life with. But the whole concept of marriage, it just, like, sends me into a spin, because I'm like, if I ever like really love someone and like want to make that kind of public commitment, I'm not going to be able to get married traditionally. And then am I going to disappoint my family by having like such an outrageous wedding that it's just like, because people are so attached to tradition. But for me, I can't disconnect that with the history of it and the connotations that you're almost perpetuating by buying into that and by doing that yourself. Yeah.
I feel the same way, and I think I've gone into like more of a kind of quarter life crisis recently where I've thought I want to get married, but do I want to get married because I've been fed this idea that I need to get married in order to be whole? Yeah. I mean, thank the Lord that my mum didn't ever show me Disney movies when I was younger, because I would be the biggest romantic in the world, and I would just be like, my Prince Charming is coming for me. Thank God I didn't. But just society in general has fed me this idea anyway. And so then I'm like, I have to second guess myself all the time. It's like, do I actually want to, even being in a relationship, do I want to be in a relationship because I actually want to be with someone? Or do I want to be in a relationship because I've been told that as a woman I'm not whole and I need to be with someone in order to make me whole? Which is perpetuated all the time by people just asking you, oh, you're in a relationship yet? Yeah. I could live my whole life without being in a relationship and it wouldn't matter. If I get married, there's no way I'm taking someone else's name. Either I'm adding it to my own name and they are doing the same thing, or I'm keeping my name. I'm not doing it. And that's not an act of rage or anything, but I'm actually questioning why it was done in the first place. And oh my God, you know what's crazy? Is I remember when I was younger thinking, I really like Phoebe Watts as a name. I feel like it works. Yeah. And whenever I would put my name with someone else's last name, you know, as you do, I was always like, that sounds shit. I want my name like Phoebe Watts works. Yeah. And I was just like, oh well, like I'll just have to deal with it. Like one day I'll just have to change my name. And obviously when I was younger,
I just like had it as a given. Like one day I won't be Lily Marshall. Yeah. Like
how bizarre is that little girls think about that? Yeah. And yet little boys have never thought about that. I have to second guess myself all the time because I don't know whether all of this stuff is a
is a product of my environment.
Combination of all, yeah. In a way, we are all a product of the environment that we've grown up in.
Yeah.
Because that's just what humans are. But then, as feminists, we constantly try to question ourselves and question those things. And I think that's a good thing. But not if it's at our own detriment, yeah. So if we're not doing things that we enjoy doing because it's not very feminist, I think all we're trying to achieve is just let people do what they enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Like, let people be the person they want to be.
Because that's who they want to be and not because they've been told that's what they want to be. Which leads us quite well onto how there's this idea of, as a feminist, you start off your journey thinking everything that I thought makes me a woman isn't okay to do anymore. So, like, I went for a long time thinking I'm not allowed to like makeup because that's a part of the patriarchy. I'm not allowed to like it.
Yeah.
And actually now I'm not that I'm at the end of my journey, but I'm more comfortable with liking makeup because I've realised I actually like doing it.
Yeah.
No matter how many men tell me that I'm putting makeup on for men, I know I like makeup.
Yeah.
I know if I wanted to sit in my yard and do my makeup and wear makeup all day, then I would do that.
Do you know, for the longest time, like, I'm really into doing nails. For the longest time, I just did it because that's what people around me were doing. That's what, like, I enjoyed watching on YouTube and stuff. And then I think it was just like my mum one day. She was like, "You're such a good artist." I was doing my nails and she's like, "You're such a good artist." And I'd never thought of it as like an art form. I'm really terrible at drawing and painting and stuff. And I've always been like, oh, I'm terrible at art. Like, I'm really not an arty person. I'm not a creative person. And I sectioned those two things as beauty and art, and I was okay at one and not good at the other one, and not actually realising that the two are actually the same thing and it's just a form of art, and that actually we're kind of conditioned to feel like beauty is something you have to be good at and something that you, like, as a woman, you just know.
I went on the same journey and I thought, I came to realise that actually I enjoy the act of putting makeup on. I enjoy doing it.
It's therapeutic.
Right, 100%. It's like painting. Like, I'm technically painting my face, right? I think one of my biggest problems was that I was told so many times that I was putting makeup on for men, for boys, and I was dressing up for boys. And I was told it so many times, I started to believe it. And I started to hate that about myself. Like, I started to be like, I can't wear clothes that are revealing because I shouldn't be attracting, I shouldn't be attracting men's attention. And the reason why I get beeped in the street and people heckling me is because I'm wearing those clothes.
And you, like, blame yourself for somebody else harassing you on the street. I was in, I think, year 10, so 14 years old, when I was first, like, the first time I remember walking along the street and being, like, beeped at by some guy in a white van. It's so...
And I find one of the biggest problems with that as well is the women who... It's like those token women who say, "Oh, well, I like it. I love it when a man beeps at me. I love it when, you know, someone wolf whistles me in the street. It makes me feel like I look good." And it's like, you are making it worse for everyone. By you saying that,
not only are you telling the people that have experienced it and had horrible feelings of it that they're wrong, you're also telling any man watching that it's okay for him to do that because he's praising and uplifting and affirming someone.
And the oppressor, quote unquote, it will only take them to hear one person to tell them validate. It's okay. Right. But there could be millions of people telling them the opposite and they won't listen. I feel like I have been told a lot in my life that I need to respect people, I need to be polite to people, I need to be kind and things like that, which I 100% agree. But once it's hammered into you and then you end up in situations like that where you can't say no. I think also, I remember the first time I started to kind of experience men turning things around on me was like when I first started, when I went to uni in my first year, and like we started going out, and I remember men approaching me and asking my number or whatever, and I'm saying, "No, sorry, can you imagine? I've got a boyfriend." "No, sorry, I've got a boyfriend." And they'll go, We can still be friends. Your boyfriend don't let you have friends.
I just have a point on that as well. How you can say no to someone 100 times and then you say, no, I've got a boyfriend. That's the point at which they're like, okay, that's where the boundary is. And they're respecting another man that they've never met over the woman that's right in front of them.
Right.
Let's talk about some of the clichés that I definitely get a lot. I'm sure you do as well when we talk about feminism to people. So hating men is the first one.
I guess some feminists do hate men. But I guess the problem would be underwriting a whole movement based on a few select people who have this hatred in them.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, I think, and maybe this might be encroaching on another point, but a lot of the time it's not about men, it's about the patriarchy and the way that society has been set up for the benefit of men.
Yeah.
And the male privilege that all men benefit from, being a male.
Yeah. In the same way that all white people benefit from white privilege.
Absolutely.
And when you talk about those things, the people that benefit from the system are naturally going to fight back and are naturally going to resist because it benefits them and they haven't experienced any of the negative causes of it. So why would they want to change it?
Yeah. And I think that brings us on to quite an important point, that women cannot be solely relied on to move the feminist movement forward in the same way that black people cannot be relied on to eradicate racism.
Yeah.
Because it's down to the people who benefit from the system
to actively choose not to benefit from it anymore and choose to challenge
and
why they've benefited
and dismantle the system that they've benefited from.
Yeah. Are you angry?
I think yes, I am angry.
Yeah.
I think the more knowledge and the more research you do, the more you educate yourself on topics like this, the more angry you're going to get.
Yeah.
I think it's a natural emotion to be angry.
Yeah, there's so much... I guess stigma is a word we're using a lot today, but there's so much stigma around the emotion of anger. And yes, anger can be presented in quite a negative way, but it's a totally natural emotion and it's a totally valid emotion to have. Like, people don't walk around being angry for no reason. It's what you do with the anger. If you're someone from the outside looking at it without understanding the reasons behind that anger, you might see that as unnecessary.
I also think that people have this shock at anger when it suits them. So when it's women being angry, when it's black people being angry, you know, when it's certain oppressed groups of people that are being angry, it's unacceptable. But when it's white middle-aged men in the House of Lords shouting at each other, getting really frustrated over politics,
it's passionate and it's
and it's okay, it's acceptable. So why are we not looking at politics in the same way? Like, oh, all politicians are angry. So I guess some people would say that feminists and the feminist movement is basically being attention-seeking. Do you think it is?
No. With any movement, you want attention. So I guess in a way it is attention-seeking because we want people to listen to us and we want people to hear our voices. But it's not attention-seeking in the way that people see attention. Like, the phrase attention-seeking is very like, oh, you're performing to get people to look at you.
It's unnecessary.
Yeah. Whereas a feminist movement or any movement for change is, yes, look at us, but also listen to us. We're making noise so you look at us. We're telling you information so that you stay and listen and help us in this change.
Right. Okay, so what about being too masculine? Feminists are too masculine.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic and I'm like still learning loads about it and really enjoying learning more about it. I think quite a recent thing that I've come to realise is that every person has a certain amount of femininity and masculinity, and kind of the whole process and the whole system that we live in the Western world is suppressing the one that you aren't. Like, so if you're a woman, you're taught to suppress your masculinity, and if you're a man, you're taught to suppress your femininity. And I think when people see feminists celebrating their masculinity, they see it as different, and things that are different are weird, and things that are different are something to be pointed at and criticised.
Are wrong.
Yeah, and actually I think it's really empowering, women embracing their masculinity, and so I wouldn't deny that some feminists do celebrate their masculinity and are more masculine, but I don't think that's a negative thing, and I definitely don't think that it's an umbrella term that you can say all feminists are more masculine. Feminist is an individual person. We're still individuals, and some individuals are on a journey and they want to celebrate their masculinity more, and some of them don't. What would your reaction be to someone who said that feminism is not necessary anymore? So they acknowledge that throughout history there were issues between patriarchy and with patriarchy, but those are overcome now and women are pretty much equal and it's not necessary anymore.
I think you can always improve on things. To choose between a career and having a baby, that's still a massive thing.
And I think that's such a important distinction, I think, between second wave feminism, which was like in the 60s, where they were changing the laws about maternity leave and things like that. So if you looked at the law and you didn't see society, you didn't see anything happening, you'd be like, oh, okay, like everyone seems pretty much on the same level here. But it's darker than that, like it's more insidious than that. It's all because you can't prove that you didn't get hired over that person because you might get pregnant, because you've just got married. We've got a goal of being equal and seeing an equal society and seeing a society in which everybody is treated fairly and people are credited for the effort that they put into things and the achievements that they have, regardless of their gender, race, sexuality, religion.
Hopefully that's kind of broken down for you a little bit of an introduction into feminism. And obviously we haven't been able to get into a lot of detail. You can tell that there's a lot to talk about and a massive history of feminism. So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one. And like the other suffragette. Anyway, the fact is
not all men. Oh no. Cut.
Just like an introduction. Let me say it again. Just like an introduction.
Do you remember the first time that the word feminism penetrated into your brain? That's not a word to use.
I do remember.
I do declare.
Together and all this stuff, but I don't know. But then okay, we need to pause where we are because I need to remember this. Okay. Every time you speak, it's like he's trying to shut me up.